Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. And I have a fantastic guest with me today who is Leilani Dowding. Welcome, Leilani.
Hi, David. Good to see you again and chat to you.
Yeah, really good to have you on the show. And I first met you in one of the freedom rallies in London, and going back in the day now, a few years, but it was very, very intense in those days. But, I want to ask you, because obviously you've got a very successful career in media before the freedom rallies and all that time, but you're now known as a political commentator, a critical thinker. You really do call out a lot of the things that the government is doing. When did you start getting involved in politics and speaking about politics and commentating on that, and why did you get involved in that area of life?
Do you know what? That's actually a really good question, because I've been wondering when somebody is going to ask me that, because I really don't know that much about politics, but I get asked to talk about it because they're all social aspects. So that's what I've always been interested, this social aspect of pretty much everything, and how these topics kind of affect everybody, just in our everyday lives. But what's happened is everything's become so politicized. So it ends up being, like talking about politics, but really it's very, it's the social aspects, the trans subjects, the lockdowns, mandates, just things for landlords, which I am, and all of these things. So, it's, men are playing in women's sports, all of these things that should be, social issues, but then they get, just turned so political. Even like, the war, it's become political, and all of this. I used to be I am anti-war, which used to be a leftist position, and now they're like, you're far right and you're an extremist and what have you. So everything's become so politicized. So I think that's how, suddenly people are like, oh, Leilani's a political commentator. But it's like, I still ring up a few people and ask, how government actually works. And I'm still trying to learn about it all, because, it does now take over everything.
Yeah, and you've just mentioned 4 or 5 things there, but there are actually, 20, 30, 40 things coming at us all at the same time. But just to pick up on one of those things, which is the whole trans agenda, and I'd never heard of this until about 10 years ago. The first time I heard about this was when I was speaking in a sixth form college in North London, and I was talking about Brexit, and then someone decided to ask me about my opinions on transgenderism, and they really had a go at me. This 17, 18-year-old student saying that my opinions were transphobic, and don't I understand how hurtful it is to be heteronormative? And I'm like, someone has put this stuff in your head and has been teaching you about this. And it's like, the 20, 30 years ago, everyone would have thought this is absolute nonsense. But today, it's been mainstream to the point that if you don't affirm this, then you're in danger of being accused of stirring up hatred and being dragged through the courts, aren't you? I mean, this is
absolutely
dreadful.
I think it's become a real social contagion as well. It really was massive in America. I probably didn't hear about it that much in the UK until like lockdowns, when all these young people were glued to their phones because they weren't allowed to go out, and suddenly these like transgender celebrities started kind of popping up, and then you had like Caitlyn Jenner, and then you had those other weird little TikTok people. I don't want to give them any publicity by mentioning their names, but it became a little scary. And I would talk about it and people were like, oh, you're just blowing everything out of proportion. And it's like, if you want to dress up as a woman and you're a man, do it, but don't expect me to play along with it and affirm it. Just the same way as if you're anorexic and you think you're fat, I'm not going to sit there and say, yeah, you're fat, let's help you get on a diet, So it's affirming insanity. But then it went even more to that, where it starts encroaching on women's safety, women's achievements. Like I won Miss Great Britain when I was 19, in 1998, when I was like 18 years old, and it opened a world for me. But now a male can win that. They can take away that prize, and in some countries it's scholarships, it's prize money. There's all
Yeah.
sorts. And but that's just a stupid pageant. What about when it's sport and people and women really dedicate themselves to getting up? The dedication that a sportswoman has is just huge. And then you have these men, and it can become quite dangerous if it's a contact sport. But
Yeah.
you've got these men, and there's some hope, because obviously Trump signed the executive order to stop that in the USA, and hopefully it trickles over here. But there's still places like Maine that immediately just went out against it and allowed a male to win the women's state, I think it was Section B, whatever that means, state championships. So hopefully we'll see some kind of normality now Trump's in. But again, who knows? But it's all insanity, and it's all
really
being politicized.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you've now got laws that affirm that you have to, if someone has a transgender identity or whatever, that they're given special privileges almost in law. And even people are acting in a way beyond the law, beyond the Equality Act, and trying to change the culture. And then this comes in, and then the people say, oh, well, this is what we're doing, so we need to change the law to reflect how society is, without telling you that they've deliberately engineered a change in society, which is absolutely insane. And like you say, is it, for me as a man, it's like, I think it's ridiculous, in general. But for a woman, your safety is in danger if you have big, hairy men going into women's changing rooms.
Absolutely. And same in women's hospital wards, in crisis centers where women go to, or hostels where women go with their children. It's wrong. It's really, really wrong. And to be called a transphobe because you want women's safety and you want women to be able to achieve their goals in their sports and not have them stolen by a man. I mean, it's insane, and it's frustrating, and it's just wrong. It's plain wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get called these names, smear names like transphobe. And you said there earlier, you're called far right. You're the least far right person I can think of, to be honest. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. Is there a specific example of when someone's called you far right for something?
I think it all started around the time of lockdowns, actually, when I was very outspoken against the lockdowns, against vaccine mandates. And then, at one point, I will actually say I didn't like Trump. The last presidency, I wasn't a Trump fan. And then suddenly people are like, oh, you must be a Trumper. You're against masks. You're against lockdowns. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not. What are you putting these labels on me for? And then there was BLM. And, in case your viewers don't know, I lived in Los Angeles for 17 years. And, I lived on a place called Melrose, which, I'd go to the pubs or the comedy stores or the bars or the restaurants late at night, and I could walk home. BLM came through with the riots. They burnt and looted all the shops along that street, like little Asian nail places, Argentinian restaurants got set on fire, independent computer shops. They weren't chains, they were little like boutiques, sunglasses shops, little coffee shops, and they're all very independent, came through, looted and burnt anything. And I spoke out about that. And then it's like, oh, you must be a right-wing racist. And I'm like, oh my God, these names are insane. And I mean, when you and we both called it out as soon as Russia went into Ukraine, we were like, okay, we need to try and get them out, but we need to use a negotiation. And those names, then it was suddenly, you're a far-right Putin supporter. Sympathizer. Putin puppet. And it's like, no, we just want peace. So all these things that used to be kind of center or a little bit left now it's like, oh, you're far right. You're far, because everything's, really, really, really shifted. And it's like, for example, as well, I used to, and I still am a huge environmentalist. But when I say environmentalist, not the net zero scam, not that scam. I'm against cutting trees down, forests down, wild woodlands. Just where I used to live in Litchfield, HS2 was going through, cut down all this ancient woodlands. Well, I stood against that. pollution in rivers, chemicals being sprayed on fields, in the air, whatever, just kept against the chemicals, against the sewage in rivers, all of these real environmental factors, they've all been put aside. Now it's just net zero and the green energy, alternative energy, because it's not green, which makes everyone more dependent on China for the minerals for it, so, and then suddenly you're against that, and it's like, well, you must be you're far right, it's if you're against net zero, it's just all insane. It's all nuts.
And that's not real environmentalism, isn't it? That's not really being green. I think we are. The greenies these days, I mean, they want to pave over farmland with solar panels and wind turbines and mass housing developments and battery storage systems, all these things which are really, really harmful to the environment. So they don't really care about the environment at all, even though they say they do. Yeah,
exactly that. And it's all about these alternative energy contracts for their buddies, and their subsidies for their buddies for their green energy, alternative energy things. So it's like you say, it's not about the environment. It's not real environmentalism. It's I think the trees want to have the carbon dioxide. It's like I should have a badge. I fed 1,000 trees today with my carbon dioxide output. It shouldn't be these carbon credits. It should be like the amount of trees and plants you fed.
Yeah, I know. It's absolutely dreadful, isn't it? And they're just ruining the countryside. And we've got now Keir Starmer in as the prime minister, and you have some very choice words for Keir Starmer, don't you? Because nothing he's doing is any good for anybody. I mean, what are your thoughts, and what are the worst things that he's doing, in your opinion, in the UK at the moment?
I think what he's doing let's just start with the pensioners. He said he was going to help the pensioners. Lie. So, cutting their heating, and it's been pretty cold. And then you got the farmers. He said he was going to protect the farmers. Now, I live out in Staffordshire, and you've got all this beautiful farmland around. And I think personally it's a land grab. This inheritance imposition is a land grab. They want it for building, they want it for solar panels. They're taking away the incentive for landowners to keep it for farming, right? Because you have all this land and you don't make that much. If you went to the American version is called Shark Tank. I always forget.
Okay.
What's
Dragon's Den.
You go to Dragon's Den and say, look, hey, I want to buy a farm, invest 3 million, you get like 0.5% return. They're going to go, that's not a good deal. So the only real incentive for farmers to keep it as farmland is probably that their kids can farm on it later in life. You start taking away that money, you start wanting that money. You want that 20% inheritance tax. They need to start selling off their farms. So it's like, do I sell off my buildings? Do I sell off the machinery? Well, if I sell off the machinery, how do I work the land? So do I sell off the land? Right. If I sell off the land to pay the inheritance tax, how do I farm anymore? So it's just destroying farming. Anyway, that's round near me. Then you've got, as a landlord, you've got the whole thing with Serco and the contracts being given to the illegal immigrants. You've got that. So the contracts for the landlords to house the illegal immigrants, that make it a far better deal than renting out privately to British citizens and legal people here. And then you've got, obviously, like, this is the crazy one, which is the EPC ratings, where they think that it's a great thing. We're going to really help renters out because we're going to make sure that the properties you rent are EPC C and above. Well, I think it's something like it's over half the buildings in the UK are not above a C. So what would happen, especially in the countryside, where you're a little off grid, you can't have a heat pump, or you're on oil or liquids, like the liquid glass you have, liquid can't remember the name. I don't have that, but anyway, you don't have no. So people, you know, in the middle of the country, they don't have all these things necessarily. They're old buildings, they don't have the fully insulated walls. So what do you have to do to bring the standards up to C? It's going to cost an absolute fortune. You might have to throw the tenants out for a bit that have been, you know, tenants that have been in there for a while. So it's not actually going to help the rental industry at all. A lot of people might not be able to afford the upgrades to bring it up to an EPCC, and then they'll have to sell. So this is really going to affect everybody, and it's even with, you know, holiday lets and stuff like that. So, you know, I'm a landlord. I do have a holiday let that I rent out, and it's a little barn conversion, stone like this in the back, and it's not going to get to that rating. So what's going to happen? You know, it will be impossible. So it's really like squeeze. The Labour government's just squeezing everybody every single which way they can, pretending it's all for the good of you know, the renters, but it's really just to squeeze British people again and have the corporations come in and buy these properties.
Right, you say, yeah, because this is not, they're presenting this as being good for renters because it will save people about £200 or £300 a year, but then the landlords are going to have to pay £5,000, £6,000, £7,000, £10,000 or even more to get up to do all the things that they say they have to do to meet this rating, like heat pumps, like loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, double glazing, and not that cost is going to be passed on to the renters, or landlords are just going to leave the market, which means there'll be fewer places for people to rent, which means the prices are going to go up because there'll be less supply and more demand. So they just really don't understand economics, this government, and everything they say in terms of if this is going to be good for people that we care about is the outcome is going to be the exact opposite of what they talk about. And, you know, again, that's just one thing. You mentioned farming, there's the war on pensioners, the private schools is another thing. That doesn't affect everybody directly, but it does affect almost everyone indirectly, because private schools are closing now because parents are pulling their children out and they're putting them into state schools, which is putting pressure on the state schools and increasing class sizes and things like that. And they just don't realize that what they're doing is utterly destructive. And, you know, another thing, obviously, at the moment that we're talking about, the Ukraine conflict is very, very much in the news. And, you know, you and I, we've just called this out from the beginning, and we want peace. We just don't want people to be fighting each other and slaughtering each other. But it seems that some of our leaders in the UK and in other places in Europe are absolutely insane. They want this to go on and continue. I mean, how does that make you feel when you hear some of the statements about putting British boots on the ground and planes in the air? I mean, in conscripting young people.
To me, it's terrifying, but it also reminds me of COVID and the COVID propaganda, you know, back in 2020, 2021, the flag waving, the profile pictures, the banners, you know, a lot of virtue signaling. People are starting to, you know, go out there and start shouting for Zelensky again. And it's like, you know, right what we said at the start, we need peace. How do we work towards peace and de-escalate? There's never been an attempt to de-escalate until Trump got into power. And this is the crazy thing. You know, all these people complaining about Trump. You had 4 years. Is it 3 years? 3 years. 4 years.
4 years. 4 years.
4 years. You've had 4 years. You know, we had all this nonsense. It would only be a couple of weeks. Putin was dying of cancer. It was never going to drag on. It's going to be the end soon. And it's carried on this long, and no one has gone in and tried to negotiate a peace deal. And the moment somebody does, you know, suddenly there's this coalition of the willing. I mean, it's a joke. You know, the ceasefire never got signed when Zelensky went to see Trump in the Oval Office. And the next day, Keir Starmer, this impotent little man, is trying to be the statesman and go, right, we're going to lead this coalition of the willing and put boots on the ground. Well, the thing is he is a compulsive liar. So I don't know why anyone in Europe would trust him. he hasn't thought anything through. We saw this with Boris Johnson. His ratings were really low because of Partygate, and all of a sudden he went over there like, oh, Churchillian. He tried to be. It was a joke. It was embarrassing. Goes over there, stands side by side with Zelensky, who starts doing all these photo shoots, pretending he's going to be on the front line, doing his Vogue photo shoots with his wife while his, citizens are dying. And now Starmer, whose ratings are rock bottom, is trying to, evoke this big, powerful statesman. I'm going to, sort all of this out. And it's a joke.
Yeah.
And it's a joke. And they want these, they want the British people to be patriotic for Ukraine, when if we were to fly a British flag, get snatched out your hand, you get sent to jail. It's like, you can't be a patriot for this country, but we want you to go over there to Ukraine. We want to put your boots on the ground in the Ukrainian winters, in the freezing cold, getting shot at, while a bunch of illegal migrants are crossing across the channel and being put up in 3, 4, 5-star hotels, with a mobile phone, warm clothes, heating on, going around sexually assaulting kids and women and even little boys, and we're supposed to do nothing. We're supposed to have our men go over there. Well, we're just sat here subjected to this, and it's a joke.
Yeah, I think everyone realizes this, that he's done absolutely nothing to keep this country safe and to protect this country from what essentially is an invasion of small boats across the English Channel. I would say, I would use that word, 50,000 people a year coming over. We don't know how many of them are jihadis. We don't know how many of them have got criminal intent or terrorist intent. Obviously, not all of them have, but some of them do. And there's over 40,000 people now on the MI5 terrorist watch list. So he's not doing anything to keep our country safe, but then he goes on and on and on about keeping Ukraine safe and winning the war in Ukraine. And like you say, it's an absolute joke, and I think most ordinary people in this country see through this. But it does worry me that you do still get these media hacks who are puffing up war, and they're maintaining these two lies. And the first lie is that Putin woke up one morning in February 2022. It was 3 years ago, not 4, like you said originally. So 3 years ago. And he decided he's going to invade Ukraine for no reason whatsoever. There's nothing that led up to this. And of course, that isn't true, because there's a lot that led up to it. And the other lie is that if we don't win, if we don't beat Putin, then he's going to roll his tanks all the way across Europe to the Atlantic. Those are two complete lies, but they're still pushed by the government and the mainstream media.
To me, this whole Putin wants to take over Europe is the same as Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. It's a lie, and it's to make everyone scared. So we're supposed to sit here in England and be scared of the Russians. Well, if we just look at what's happened in England today, with no one's safe, everything's getting broken into, your house, your car, you get your tools nicked from the van, nothing happens. Kids are getting stabbed on the street, kids are getting stabbed at school, women are literally walking through parks to get home, or taking their dog for a walk, getting pulled into bushes and raped. A woman in Birmingham was just raped, by 2 men not long ago, and it barely made it made the local papers. That was it. And we're supposed to be scared of Russians when we are. What's going on in our country right now? And where do they think they're going to get this money from? We only just paid the Second World War off in 2006. So it's like, how much would you like to tax us? Do you want to raise our taxes back to how they used to be at 90% or something? What how do you want to fund all of this? Because you don't seem to want to put Britain first at all. It's all, it's all Britain last, everywhere else first.
If they put Britain first and they put the British people first, we'd be in a much better position. In fact, you look at Russia and you see there, someone did a statistical analysis and they worked out that there are 10 times as many people in prison in the UK or have been dragged through the courts in the UK for speech crimes than in Russia, something like 3,000 compared to 300. So, you're actually got more free speech in Russia, and it's a country with twice the population as the UK as well. So it's ridiculous that they're telling us, oh, how wonderful we are the bastion and the home of freedom and democracy, but really that's gone. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people are just not buying into this lie anymore, that we need to send British troops to Ukraine to defend freedom and democracy, because you compare life here and in Russia, and actually it looks quite good in some aspects there.
I know. No, it's really, they've really they really push this. And it's funny, I watched David Starkey, the historian, speaking, and he says the problem is with a lot of British people is they really put a lot of focus onto being nice. So they're really upset that Trump wasn't nice. However, he was honest and he was transparent. But a lot of people, and you see a lot of people saying, well, this should have happened behind closed doors. But you know what? We got to see everything play out from start to finish. It was full transparency of the way it went. And again, like I said, people want niceties. Sometimes you can't be nice, and sometimes and honest. And it's the same thing. It's like we're being so nice, letting these illegals come in, and it's suicidal empathy. That's what it is. It's suicidal empathy. We're so busy being so nice to all these people that want to come in across boats who are completely unchecked, whose backgrounds we don't know, who could be criminals, and we have to put up this thing of being nice, and Trump's just an awful person because he's not nice, and it's actually it's dangerous, but at the same time it's also almost laughable that we're living in such a clown world.
It is. I always say there's a difference between being nice and being good, and Trump is not nice, but he is good. If what he's doing is good, it's good for the American people, it's good for the American economy. And I think what he's doing is actually going to be good for us, by default in some areas, because he's now bringing in, rules and legislation for free speech that says, if a country does not affirm and underpin free speech in their own society, then they're not going to do a trade deal with them. So, that's going to be, have a good effect on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's really, I think that's a real value. If you value free speech, I understand why he calls out the UK and says, look, we don't share the same value. It's a huge value to the Americans to have free speach. And then we really don't have it here. Starmer can sit there and lie in front of the world that we've had free speech for a long time and we will continue to, but it's a blatant lie. And he's not good at it because we all see through it, but he seems very confident about continuously lying. And it's like he doesn't even care if he gets caught out. He'll just lie a little bit more and don't even acknowledge that we know that he's lying.
I don't know what it is with these people. They just think that if they say it enough times and they say it, with enough intensity, people are going to believe it. But people are seeing through this now. It's not working. And it's so obvious that it's a lie.
Maybe he thinks it's because he's had all these years as a lawyer where he only speaks to like a very small jury and he has to just try and convince them. And it doesn't really matter if he says things enough, the jury is going to absorb it. But you know what? There's too many people around the world listening, calling out his lies for him to be able to continue to do that. And to me, it was kind of funny how you see this real panic across X today, because they're like, hold on a minute, the USA is pulling aid for Ukraine. But you know what? You on Saturday sat there having these wonderful PR press shoots about how you had this coalition of the willing, which by the way was a term made up for Iraq. So, the coalition of the willing, and you're going to be the ones, you European leaders, along with Trudeau, you're going to be the coalition that and now, hold on a minute. You started trying to play this game, but as Trump said, there's no cards. He doesn't have the cards. So now there's this panic that the US are withdrawing funding. But you all had smiles on your face Saturday when you went behind the back of the president. You know, you were like, well, Trump won't do the deal, so let's try and do it here. Well, now you're in panic mode. And it's kind of, it's interesting to watch because you're seeing their lies and their bluffs kind of fall apart in real time. It's very interesting.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Because they all went over to Washington to have meetings with Trump, like you say, and then they come back and they have their own meeting and they exclude President Trump and said, oh, well, we've met you, but this is what we're going to do and you're not going to be any part of it. So, you know, what would you do? Well, President Trump has got every right to say, well, you don't want me in your meeting. Well, I'm just going to do what I want to do there. And he's done it. And he's done the right thing, I think, you know, defunding military aid, lethal aid to Ukraine. So he's not going to send any more weapons which are going to kill people, which is, you know, exactly the right thing to do. It's really good. But look, Leilani, I just want to ask you about one more thing, which is, it's related to what we've been talking about, but it's a little bit more local. And it's something I've been speaking about for a long time, and people I know, which is the devolution agenda. And this is the restructuring of local government in England. And to some people, this seems like a bit of a dry conversation, but it is really going to affect everybody to a very, very large extent, because local councils are in charge of housing, of planning. They affect businesses, they affect parks, they affect schools, they affect council tax rates. And I'm just going to put up this clip here. It's well, not a clip, a graphic. It's a little bit scary. So I want you, the picture here is it's sort of like a polemic of Angela Rayner. She just presents herself as this nice, you know, northern lass who goes dancing in Ibiza. But what she said a couple of days ago, few days ago, about planning and housing in the system that we've got now that allows people to object to new planning developments, housing development. She says, I am absolutely determined to break that system, and I'm handing mayors the sledgehammer. Mayors are at the center of our plan to build 1.5 million homes by giving them the power they need. So, like in your area, because you live in a rural area, your government, your local government is in the process of being restructured, where they're going to merge some local councils and then over the top put in a county mayor who will have total power invested in him or her as a single person, in the same way as Sadiq Khan has the power to do whatever he wants in London. How do you feel about that affecting your local area and how it's going to affect you?
I mean, this is absolutely horrific, and we've had no say in this. And I've had to speed learn it. Going back to what you're saying about like the politics, I've had to speed learn this because, you know, it's happening in my area. So I live in a very lovely park called Staffordshire Moorlands. It's a lot of farming. It's a very rural farming kind of area and community. And actually it's run pretty well. I have to say, you know, everything's clean, tidy. It's run pretty well. You know, recently there have been suddenly all these solar farms and building things that had been denied and gone to appeal, and they've been passed. So that has been a problem. But what's happened is that Stoke Council now wants to absorb us, and we merge together. And the problem is Stoke Council is like 4 million in debt, is massively in debt and had to be bailed out by 4 million by the government. So what that actually means is that now my council tax is going to have to go towards this poorly run area of Stoke, and we're going to have to start paying for the migrants there and the fact that they can't balance their books, and then they, you know, whatever they are allocated for the illegals, they'll have, you know, they'll be put into our areas as well. And it's absolutely horrific. I'm actually going to my first like meeting about it. I literally had only kind of heard about this probably within the last month. And it's obviously been going on long before that, but it's something that I've had to, like, you know, really find out about it, because it is affecting me and everyone, you know, everyone around us. And it's really, the scariest thing is when you start encroaching kind of into the countryside, you have people, you know, you start getting, you know, farmers whose land starts getting chopped up, but you have people that don't even understand like the area, walk their dogs off leash, kill a load of sheep. I mean, this happens all the time around me, you know, sheep. And then you start having sheep getting butchered in the field. This is happening. People think it's, you know, it's kind of made up, or whatever. You have literally having sheep having their necks slashed in fields. I mean, I'm kind of digressing from the political and, you know, the Stoke and Staffordshire Moorlands merger and going more into like, you know, what happens when you start building all over the countryside. But, you know, going back, but this is, you know, real and what's happening in kind of our area. But going back to the political side again, as you say, it's like, you know, this whole merger and these mayors that are going to control everything, it's happening all around the country, and we don't get a vote in it. And to be quite honest, you know, you see all these things about withholding, not stopping, but withholding your council tax. There's been people trying to campaign to withhold. I've actually been really happy with my council wherever, for the most part, but I can tell you now, I will be one of those people that withhold if they take away you know, kind of my rights to be able to vote for any of this to happen. If they want to take that away, I think I'm going to have to join, you know, the withholding the council tax, because it's wrong. It's wrong that this is happening, and we have, you know, we don't get to decide kind of what happens locally anymore. It's just like this big head who's going to say, like, screw it, let's just build everywhere. Let's allow all the appeals to go through, and we'll just like give out, you know, allow all the people to build everywhere and put the solar farms everywhere and battery powers everywhere, and no, it's not, and have our council tax go up because they can't manage the money.
That's exactly it. And people are not being asked. They're not even being told. A lot of people don't even know this is happening, but it is happening without people being consulted or informed properly. And, you know, like, so you say you live in a rural area that's pretty well run. I mean, that's great that you've got a local council that actually you're happy to pay a little bit of council tax to you because they run the area very well. But if it's not going to, you know, you talk about a merger, but it's effectively going to be a takeover by the much larger city of Stoke-on-Trent, and the people who live there are not going to care about whether there's solar farms or housing developments. You know, that's what it's for, as Angela Rayner has specifically said. The rearrangement of government and then the imposition of these county mayors is to get this rapid mass development, these 1.5 million homes built in the next 4 years. So this is the point of it, and your area is likely going to be ruined in large part with lots and lots of development. And of course, you know, you mentioned migrants coming in, and they put migrants all over the country. They're going to be put in your area as well, and little villages are not able to absorb lots of military age men.
No, they really, really aren't. And we're seeing that as well, aren't we? We're seeing, like, you know, a village of 700 being asked to take on 800 men. You know, it's nuts. But it's like you say, I don't think a lot of people knew about this. And I, for one, even me, I had no clue until about a month ago. I've had to speed learn it because it's happening. And it was actually when I went to a local reform meeting, I had somebody come up to me and say, Leilani, do you know about this? And they're trying to, you know, put Stoke and Staffordshire Moorlands. And I was like, what? And I mean, I'm embarrassed that I don't know about it, and I'm embarrassed that I don't fully understand it. But I think everybody, you know, everybody watching this who's listened to you needs to go out and start researching what's going into our area. So then I posted about it, and I've had all these friends saying it's happening all over the country. And, you know, like you said, these mayors are going to just push through the appeals and say, yeah, you can build here. We don't care what anyone says. We don't care that people have opposed it. We don't care what the people living in the area think. we're going to do it anyway. And what we're going to do is raise your council tax because we got to pay for it all. So I think, you know, it's going to hit us in all kinds of different ways. And it's just so important that people go out and try and understand and keep learning about it, as I'm doing, which is why I'm going to the meeting in Leek, because I need to know more. You know, I think people need to have that curiosity to go out and say, right, I don't fully understand it, but I need to go and learn more about what's happening in my area.
Yeah, and I think people need to do that now before it's too late. And this is my frustration over the time I've been in politics, is that people often don't act until it's too late. And what I'm doing, what you're doing, is sitting there seeing things coming down the line, coming at you, and say, we got to stop this now before it happens. Because if you get this, you know, this reorganization of districts and these regional mayors, like a Sadiq Khan in every county, it's going to be too late by then. And I'll give a plug to my own party, the Heritage Party, as well. I know you mentioned reform, but we've been, you know, speaking out against it, you know, for a longer time. We've got a lot of things on our website that actually, you know, you can look at to, you know, get some idea of the details of what's happening. You know, we hopefully will be able to change the government in 2029 at the next election, but this Labour government, the Starmer regime, has got a dreadful program for the next 4 years that they're still in, and if we don't get ahead of this and stop it and you respond to the consultations, you act against it, we're going to get a lot of things that we don't want, and are going to be very, very harmful to local communities. So I'm glad you're taking action now, and you're finding out.
Trying to. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, you have been for the last 4 or 5 years, I know, and you know, that brings me back to the first time I met you on the Freedom rallies, and it's been a long journey since then. There's some crazy stuff happening almost every day that they're throwing at us, but we try to keep ahead of everything.
I know, it's so true, isn't it, David? Sometimes I think, right, I'm just going to do a little couple of days social media detox, stop everything, and you go back and you're like, wait a minute, did this happen? This is even worse. How could it have? How can so much have happened in the life? And it's just, that's the thing, it's just constant. There's always something going on, so it's hard to keep on top of it all, and sometimes, you know, I know there's a lot of people that just feel overwhelmed that they're getting battered by every single side and angle, and you know, you've got to and you know, you just got to try and keep on top of it, and you know, when sometimes you've got to see like the posturing for what it is, and sit back a minute and take a breath and say, okay, what can I do? Let me see if I can get involved at any kind of level, and you know, try and work to bring about what I want.
Well, one thing I would say just at the end is the appeal that I make very often is, do get actively involved in politics. And there are local elections coming up on the 1st of May. And if you want to stand in those, you've got to get your papers in to the council by the 2nd of April. So there's about a month left to decide if you want to stand as a candidate to try to get onto some of the councils around the country. I know there's elections where you are in Staffordshire. There's elections near me in some places in the south of England as well. And so, you know, try to, if you can, join a party, stand. You can join my Heritage Party if you like. We put up candidates, stand, try to get on the council, and then you're on the inside, and then you have at least a little bit of power to try to change things and to resist the agenda, which really is a communist agenda, to be honest. It looks like that's what they're doing. Anyway, Leilani, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about all of these things.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for all you're doing, and you speak out against all of these things, and I love what you write on X. So look at you.
I keep it clean, though. I do keep it clean when I come on a podcast, don't I?
You've been very good. You haven't gone once, so neither have I. So you've been good. Marvelous.
Thanks, David.
Okay, thank you, Leilani.
Cheers.